I don't know if we need to introduce ourselves every time, to be honest.
Well, you have to. Want to know an animal? Why do you always assume that people know you?
There's only two of us.
Well, but people don't know that yet, right?
We can start by mentioning each other's names. Hey, Tolani.
Hey, Mo. Well, I'm Mo, though, on the show.
Oh, sorry. I always forget I call you Tolani.
It's okay. I actually like that you call me Tolani.
Yeah.
I always say, people that call me, there are two kinds of friends I have. If you call me Mo, I can always predict our friendship. But Tolani, when I hear that, it almost like takes me back home.
Yeah. I actually used to call you Motolani, but I don't know why I started calling you Tolani.
Okay, I know you used to call me Moti at a point, remember?
I used to call you Moti.
Yeah.
I wonder if we can date our friendship by the names I've called you.
I know.
Like, the season.
And I could say MFD and MD.
Yeah, there was that whole phase.
The whole phase. And there was the Truth Hunter phase. And there was the Ayo phase, which, I had to die quickly. Well, did it kill?
Die a hot blazing death.
I get so offended. But I don't know why. You're still like an Ayo to me. I don't know. Why don't you like that
I'll tell you something funny. So, like, people here know that I'm Ayomide, right?
Yeah.
And then I had, this person wasn't my friend, but like, it's someone who knows a good friend of mine. And then the person was talking to me. We're all talking together. And the person was like, something. And I'm going to come and find Ayo and something. And he's going to get very upset with me because I just called him Ayo. And it was funny because when he first said Ayo the first time, I thought he knows better than to do that. But I was going to think to myself, I'll let it pass because I don't want to always insist on it. And also because I was pretty sure my friend would call him out on it and be like, you shouldn't call him Ayo. He doesn't like,
You've primed us all like Pavlov dogs.
But then the sort of recovery, well, not recovery, because I think it was set up from the start. I realized, that was a good one. Like, it was a good one. Anyway, we're going to talk about Mental Health Month.
Yeah. Hi there. Welcome to the More Simple Podcast. This is a podcast for Blacks, Asians, and those who love them. I am Mo, and I am your host, ready to spark your curiosity as I take you on this adventurous ride of exploring cultures through the stories of my guests from all over the world. On this show, we get really personal, discussing salient issues that are relevant to our contemporary age and also building community around them. As our guests exercise courage and vulnerability in sharing their life's experiences, we hope that in turn you are inspired by them and that you get the courage needed to set your own stories free. Enjoy the ride, and thank you so much for listening. Welcome to the show, everyone. This is Motolani and
Ayomide. Oh yeah, Motolani now.
Yeah, because it's Mo and Tolani. And May is mental health. May is Mental Health Awareness Month.
May for Mo.
May for Mo. M for mental health. M for Mo. And without even trying, because we sat down with our assistant and we said, oh, you know what? We've kind of eased it into talking about mental health in the month of May. So our first two episodes have really explored communities and staying connected. Last one was on looking at Ormi's story. So we just wanted to be more intentional about mental health and talk about it. And as you guys know, it's such a vast topic, so we'll just try to contain it, but also leaving you guys encouraged and I guess have some resources to help in whatever phase of life.
And the theme for this month is Let's Connect, which I think for me, for both of us actually, speaks to something that we think about a lot and that we hold very important, which is the importance of community and power of relationships. And as you said, that's something we've talked about in the last few episodes. We've talked about. I think we pretty much started, our hosting together with that, didn't we? Because we talked about friendships, and then when we talked about birthdays, we talked about relationships and community, and obviously it's come up again in each of the interviews we've done as well. So clearly this is something that's pretty top of mind, I would say.
Exactly. And without us even trying to force it, because a lot of our conversations are just unscripted. And I bet if someone were to do like a content analysis of our podcast episodes, that'll be one of the top themes, like connections, community, connecting, the C words.
So, you know, and it is such a big thing. One of the things that, I mean, I suppose we could talk about migration later, but one of the things that I have found in moving here, which I think everyone does when you move, is all the things you take for granted in your culture, you know, whatever culture it is you're coming from, that only sort of become obvious when you come up against a culture where those things are not only not taken for granted, but in some cases are not even, they're not even on the radar at all. And vice versa, where things that people in the culture you're coming into take for granted are things that aren't even on your radar, or where they, you know, or where they are, they're not quite as important. And that clash of cultures always, sometimes it causes friction, but I find it, for me, I find fascination in it because it's just a source of endless surprise and delight and learning. And yes, friction as well, but you learn from that as well, don't you? So one of the things for me was something that I came to realize recently, you know, and it's the idea, you know, there's sort of this idea which we all grew up with because it's very big in Disney. And that means everybody in the world has sort of absorbed the idea on some level of going off to find yourself into the distance and, you know, away. And it's an interesting thought, the idea of finding yourself by leaving everything behind. But something that struck me recently is actually we need other people to find ourselves. And actually, and so like the most succinct way I can put it is sort of the idea that you need other people to know yourself, right? Like who you are, sorry, go on.
I think we talked about that during the superpowers and community. Sorry, I was going to say that we really emphasized that during the superpowers and community episode, where there's no way you can find yourself without being in the place of other people. It's actually easier, and you can kind of like calibrate as you go. You need people to bounce that off and, you know, call it out in you, things that you know you think is just seamless, but others might not be able to attain that, you know, level of, I guess, activity that you have, or features or traits.
And the same thing with mental health. Mental health is it's not individual solely. It's very much social. It's relational, right? One of the essays I wrote once, you know, last year was the idea of the ancient sort of Hebrew idea of shalom. No.
Is it takes a village?
The idea of shalom and how shalom
it takes a village,
we translate as peace. But peace is something that when we think about, and shalom kind of meant well-being, and, you know, being sort of, well, I don't want to spoil it, so I'll just leave it as well-being, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But then when we think of peace today, we think of peace as an emotional thing, don't we? We think of peace as, you know, feeling at peace in myself, that sort of thing. I don't think there's almost anyone, you know, whether, you know, and this is not even about like Christian per se, it's just anyone period in modern times who would think of the word peace and not think of it as sort of emotional state of being, right? Be at peace, that sort of thing, or find your inner peace, and all these phrases that we have.
Be his peace.
You know, but then you go back to the idea of shalom, and you realize that peace for them was actually about relationships. It's actually being in right relationship with everything, right? With God, with people, with the earth, with the animals, and yes, with yourself as well. But it was all connected. Like if one of those relationships is out of whack, then it throws everything else out of whack, because they're all interconnected, right? And that for me was interesting, because in a sense it also includes the emotional idea of peace, in the sense of if you are peace within with all those things, then the emotional feeling sort of follows. It's almost inevitable. But when you focus on the emotional bits, what the danger of that is it then becomes this sort of introspective, navel-gazing thing if you're not careful. And then you're focused on that while you're ignoring all the relationships that actually are important for the peace that we're looking for. And so the way I sort of think of it now is like peace is not emotional, peace is relational, right? And I feel like that's what this idea of mental health month and Let's Connect is sort of speaking to. It's sort of sort of coming full circle and recognize that actually mental health in myself is the outshoots, or the sort of, it springs out of all the connection that I have been, working properly and functioning right, and just being I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if that's something you've thought about as well, but I think you have.
I have, but I've not quite put it in you have a fine way of just articulating these things, and it makes sense that it's a harmony of all kinds of things. But I think for so long we always make it to be personal. But like you said, it's relational. And I think it goes back again to that episode on how you can only discover yourself when you're with other people, and not just other people, but other people who are, quite like you, or they care about you, and they're able to prune those things out of you. Something happened to me this week then, because I feel like so far we've really laid the background for mental health. I don't want it to be too abstract and lose half of our listeners. You've kind of helped us lay the foundation for just thinking about mental health and as more of a relational thing rather than a personal thing. And I was going to make it a bit more personal by sharing something that happened to me this week around, I think it's still mental health and connection. And because I don't want to lose half of our listeners by just, talking about things because I feel like stories kind of connect, episodes better. When I mean episodes, I mean like, when you hear stories about things that you're going through, you're more likely to remember them. So I struggle with, and this is going to be quite a vulnerable moment, and let me try and put it into words so I don't get too caught up in my feelings. I think one of the hardest things to kind of grasp, or what's the word? One of the hardest part of just my personality is closure. I find it hard with closure and not having closure on some things. So there have been 2 times in my life where, and I think I've told you about one of this, but the second one I haven't really delved into. But similar occurrences where you do life with certain person or groups of people, not groups of people because it sounds like many people, but let's say individuals, you do life with certain individuals, and you click, you connect, it's not just hi, hello, it's like your communities are so intertwined, and then they just ghost you. And I know that is kind of rich coming from me, because apparently I have ghosted people without knowing it. Ayomide is an episode that comes to mind. But this recent one felt very, very personal, because I remember when the drifting apart started, I called this person because I wanted to be sure that they knew how I felt. I'm like, hey, what's going on? We haven't talked in a while. It's unlike you. And they were like, oh, you know what? I'm so sorry. Well, it's not you. It's me. And if I cast my mind back into our relationship, it's always been, I felt like I'm more dominant in the sense that I'm always mostly the one doing the check-ins, and my personality allows for that. But sometimes I felt like I was always the one dragging the other person along, because they were more introvertish, and I'm not as introverted as they were. But so we and I told them that I'm not gonna call you again. I'm not gonna reach out again until I hear from you. Whatever you're going through, I understand if you don't want to include me, but it's just been weird not hearing from you. And I think we ended that conversation, just saying, I'm sorry, I miss you as well. And we kind of laughed, but a part of me just knew that I was never going to be the same again. So fast forward 2 years, I've not heard from this person. And it's so weird because I always remember their birthday. And I'm tempted to reach out on their birthday, but I don't, because I didn't want to break my rule of I'm not going to contact you. So I had put up a post recently about my daughter I came out publicly talking about our adoption and how my husband and I have had a daughter now for the past 2 years. And she sent me a text saying, "Oh, I'm so happy for you guys. I've always known it was going to happen, yada, yada, yada." And it made me angry, a little bit angry, because I'm like, why I was like, so you remember me? And they do this thing called orbiting, which is when you look at your WhatsApp status, they always view them. So they, sometimes she'll, I don't want to, I just outed their gender. They would, like old pictures from the past, like maybe like a comment from Facebook, but you're not actually talking to me. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? And for whatever reason, I know I don't think it's really about me. Maybe they're going through something or whatever, but it still hurts that. And I decided to just let it go this particular week. Like, you know what? So I was like, thank you so much. I really appreciate your message. And that was it. The old me, I probably would have let her know about my daughter from the very first day. I would have shared a lot because she was like a sister to me, and it's no more. It kind of died. And sometimes that's very hard for me because not many people are in my circle. I do have friends, but not everyone I can say in my circle. She was somebody that I really deeply cared about, and I could never have guessed that in a million years our relationship is going to delve into this. So I don't know if you've had experiences with that. And I guess my question for you would be, how would you suggest processing that?
I mean, I don't know. It sounds... I think it's challenging for a big reason. And I think part of the reason is I'm probably more likely to be that person here. So I don't feel like, that would be rich. Me.
Why do you think I'm asking? Because I know you're the ghost. But you're not you're never gonna get rid of me.
Low-key, part of me when you were saying this, I was like, this isn't me, right? This isn't, no, it's not. No, I know it's not me.
I mean, you can never get rid of me.
I know it's not me,
forever
but,
friends.
I did have to wonder
friends.
for a bit there.
No, it's not you. It's not
is this like 5 level degrees shade?
You can never let go of me. Like, I will refuse.
But yeah, it's hard because as being that person, I would probably say that sometimes it's not really about you. And that's tricky because I think with some people it is. Some people sometimes withdraw from you for all kinds of reasons. And sometimes it can be as simple as they're struggling with you in ways that they struggle to articulate. I've had friends talk about other friends sort of dealing with jealousy, for instance, or dealing with other sorts of things, or even just the sort of idea of like one, you feel like your friend is doing well, and I suppose that's still jealousy in ways that not necessarily you want to do well in those ways, but it feels like they're getting what they want and you're not getting what you want, that sort of thing. And I think sometimes I've seen people gravitate really quickly to those as, oh, that's why this person is not doing this. And I don't think it's always that simple. Sometimes they're just in a place in their life where stuff comes up, which is not to justify or excuse it. But the point is, it's just to say that it's not like there's something you're doing. It's just them being caught up in whatever it is, that's going on with them. I'm obviously all of this is speculation because I don't know.
I mean,
it's conjecture.
I guess. Exactly, because I'm like, why can't the opposite be true? Exactly. Why can't the opposite be true? Like, because I tend to take the burden on myself, like, oh yeah, maybe you're too much. And I start thinking about maybe times I've said things that wasn't quite, good. But we kind of talked through it and, I mean, it's gone both ways where you use words in friendship, and I'm like, was there some residual things there that were not addressed, And I'm not someone that wouldn't apologize if I know I've hurt somebody, right? But I want to say that I never, that sometimes I just want to reach out to this person Yeah.
No, but having said that, I would probably also still say that and this is something that I do. And I'm not going to lie. What I'm about to say, I don't even know that it's the best way to do things. It's just, it kind of works with how I work. And it goes back to an adage that I'm sure you heard me say before, which I first heard from an uncle of mine when I was a kid. You know what I'm about to say?
Wait, which
I'm
of your...
curious, what do you think I'm about to say? Which one?
Wait, no, it's not the one. But give me a prefix of it. Oh, 20 friends cannot play together for 20 years. Is that one? Oh, but I couldn't come up with that.
Yes. Actually, it's...
Oh, yeah.
I know. I said I first heard it from my uncle.
Sorry,
and it's 20 children.
Not even 20 friends, actually. 20 children. Yeah.
No, it's 20 children. The idea being that as they grow older and time passes, like that basically time changes relationships, right? Irrespective of your own intentions, time changes relationships because of all the things that come with it. And I think when I first heard that, I heard it as a tragic thing. I heard it as sort of like a tragedy. Like, oh, it is such a sad thing that 20 children cannot play together for 20 years. Because things will change. Some will move or die or just drift or whatever. All sorts of, and obviously there'll be conflict as well. But I think as time has passed for me too, I've come to think of it as not tragedy, but just reality. It's like this is the nature of being human and of being in the reality that we are, with this, in space time and all of this is what happens with relationships. Is that they come and they go. And I kind of have come to start to think of relationships as things that I think that there's some relationships you hold on to. I also don't think that that's in most relationships. I think that with most relationships, you recognize that they come and they go. And when I say come and go, I don't think that means the people go. But sometimes it's the same person is there, but you have a different kind of relationship with them.
And I think for me, it's just, if I knew that was going to be how it was going to, I felt like I would have done better. You cannot know.
But you can't know.
And then sometimes I see things, because this person and I connected on a very intellectual level, and I want to just reach out and be like, share this joke or, something I saw, something I read, and they always got it. We just got each other so much. And I thought about just, even like being a mom, she was one of the first person I wanted to reach out to, like, guess what? But I guess, and I don't want to spend so much time talking about this. And my personality type is also one that tends to just internalize that to me. Oh, you were too much. Oh, But I guess you're right. It could have just been many things.
Well, I'm saying maybe it's not either of you. Maybe it's just time. Maybe it's just
perhaps
that time. It's like spring
season.
When spring ends, and nothing you did
could have ended. Yes, I know.
Or could have prolonged. Like, do you know what I mean?
I know. But I just like closure. I think this is just. I think me just even talking about it right now, it's. I'm ready to move on, and it's the last part of me just airing what that rejection felt like. Even though I don't think it was necessarily rejection, but kind of to honor our friendship. It
felt like rejection, and I think that's what I mean. But it's also, I think there's value recognizing that.
Yes,
it feels like rejection doesn't mean it was rejection. And sort of holding those two ideas together.
Yes, and I think I also it kind of delved into something, and I don't want to hold them responsible for it. Again, I thought it became more of like that self-worth, like, oh yeah, if that friend that was very intimate with you could cut you off, then you're nobody. And I remember having a talk with my therapist, and she was like, why would you say that about yourself? And we went through just where how that started. And I mean, I just thank God for therapists, man, because
so there was some projection
imagine just
there,
having that
basically.
thought, there was. There was, and my therapist is someone that I'm so free to express a lot of the things I'm not able to even talk about with her. And she has this gift of just teasing them out and laying them against some things I've already talked about myself and things she knows about me. Like, that's not true, because remember when you said this about this other person, when you did that, that's not how you are. Remember. It's like your own psych person that you're paying, you're paying for. But again, I think it goes back to that thing you said earlier in one of our episodes about relationships and how therapy is like, being in a relationship, a healthier form of a relationship. And that also helps you model with the kind of thoughts you should be having. And when some bad thoughts spring up, the standards you want to set against them. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of closure, I think there's something you said as well, which is that, on one hand, you want closure, but on the other hand, you are finding closure by talking about it. And I think sometimes, I think there's a way we can think of closure that's not very helpful, where closure is this thing that someone has to give us.
Yeah.
And I think there's a danger in that. Do you know what I mean? Instead of thinking of closure as something you do.
It's kind of like forgiveness.
Yeah, because there's a sense in which that sort of, it's like you're giving up your own agency. You know what I mean? If the person doesn't tell me, then I will never get closure. And rather than, you know what, I'm just going to close this chapter. And I'm and it's not easy either way, but the truth is, even if the person were to say, that's still not easy either. And it's never as easy as we think. Because that then can lead to its own, so that's why. So you mean I wasn't good enough? You know what I mean? And all this. So it's, I think there's just something to be said for keeping in mind that there's a way we can think about closure that I think can actually rob us of our own agency. And we're unwittingly pretty much saying, I cannot move forward with my life until you do X. So you're basically like, do you know what I mean? I was like, well, what if they choose not to do X? What then?
You know what? Thanks for saying that. And you're right. Thanks for saying that. And if you permit me, is it okay to just say something? Like almost like I'm talking directly to the person. I don't know if they're going to listen to this.
Go for it.
Hey, if you listen to this episode, I'm talking about you. And I want to say thank you so much for being a very good friend and a sister. I went to the place where we met not too long ago, and it was kind of hard not to really experience that city without you being there. And visiting some places reminded me of you. And I miss you, and for whatever reason, we're not as close as we were before. It's okay. I'll be fine. But sometimes I just want to reach out to you and just talk to you about being a mom and all of the weird, fun experiences that have come with that. Because I know you have your own daughter too. I think about some nerdy stuff I come across. Our mutual love for Korean dramas and technology and apps, mutual hatred for Apple products and all that. And I really don't have anybody to talk to about that because Ayomide here, but he loves Apple, so that kind of precludes him. But anyways, just to say, I miss you and I wish you the very best. Your message that you sent to me recently on Mother's Day kind of brought up some anxious feelings about our relationship because you talked about us like we're still talking. And I didn't think that was, I didn't take it in a very good way, even though you probably weren't thinking of it like that. It wasn't anything you did wrong. It was just that, why are you just texting me without even prefacing our silence over these years? But again, I hope you're happy. And thank you so much. Yeah. I felt good doing that. I didn't even think I was going to talk about this today. What do you do to me, Ayomide? You shrink people. You just make us just talk.
No, yeah.
Yes, you shrink. You make us just pull everything out, even in front of people. And
wow.
I cannot move forward. Just kidding.
Projector me, why don't you?
And I think I'm thankful that I have the opportunity to see a therapist, because I don't know if I ever told you this. The very first time I knew that I needed to talk to somebody was when I was like 10. When I say talk to somebody, I needed professional help, was when I was 10, but there was nobody I could ask, because I was very afraid that...
You've talked about knowing when you were 10, but I didn't realize you talked about it in the context of knowing something was up.
Yes.
I don't think I've heard you talk about it in the context of knowing you needed to talk to someone.
I remember talking to my friends about it, and they looked at me like, what's wrong with you? Like, these are my peers, my friends who love me, and maybe I was talking to them in church, during the sermon.
I mean, none of us was thinking about therapy then.
No, they weren't talking about therapy.
By us, I don't mean I was one of your friends. In case
I know,
thinks that's what I'm saying. No, not you. I mean, people listening.
Yes, I know, and I were your friends there. Maybe I should have met you earlier on, because I'm sure you came out just knowing about therapy.
I probably would have talked to you.
Yeah, that's true. I've been the weird kid. Like, who's that weird kid just hanging around, not talking and just staring at everybody and reading his books? But I knew something was off when I was 10, and I think what really saved me was books and reading about stuff, because there were no resources. And growing up in an ultra-religious environment, which had its perks, by the way, because the church saved me in many ways. It kind of provided, and we can talk more about that maybe on another episode, of how in developing country like ours, religious institutions actually do a lot in keeping the sanity that we give them credit for.
And in richer countries as well, to be honest.
Yeah, that's true. I think moving to the US was, I won't call it more like almost like now you have the resources, the problems have doubled. I began therapy in the US, and I began it almost reluctantly.
You didn't say when you started. You knew when
I went to see therapy. Remember that time I called you? I didn't.
You talked about it later on.
Tell you, I read your post. Yeah, you knew when. Yeah, so Ayomide had put a post up about I think it was suicide and whatnot, and the signs that maybe you're suicidal. And I kind of took that test like.
I thought it was one on depression.
Was it depression? Whatever. Yeah, it was depression.
I may be wrong because I'm not sure I trust this, but as I recall it was that you said I'd written something about depression and you realized.
I think it was depression for you, because after I took that test, I realized that okay, this is really depression, because I didn't know what was going on with me. I had crying spells. I wasn't going to church. I wasn't doing anything. I kind of moved to the guest room then in my apartment. I told my husband, I don't want to talk to anybody. Just, let me be. And what your post did for me was to call the nurse helpline. And she asked me a couple of questions. And then that was when she now said, okay, no, you're really bad. This is almost like borderline suicidal. The only difference was I didn't have like an active plan of how I was going to off myself. But it was bad enough that she was like, I'm going to stay on the line until you come to the health center. And I'm going to keep calling you until I know that you've checked in. And I think it probably saved my life in many ways, because up until then, I had carried myself with all of my resources, find ways to kind of make myself happy and always think positive thoughts. But things came to a head when I realized that I couldn't just do it on my own anymore. And it began with individual therapy. And even going to the therapist's office, there was something she said that I always keep going back to. She was like, where are you from? I'm like, Nigeria. She was like, wow, I commend you for coming here. I mean, this was a white lady, right? For her to have said that, almost like she had a cultural awareness of just how we don't even really talk to people about our mental health issues. And that's one thing I always want to do in my life right now, is to normalize seeking help, especially mental health. So I've been very open about my struggles with anxiety and even depression, and just saying it's okay not to be okay. And I think just carrying this along in a vulnerable moment there's something myself I've been talking to Ayomide for years about, and that was the decision to be on medications for anxiety and depression. And I'd always been of this school of I'd always belonged to the school of thought that it was going to alter your brain chemistry.
I mean, never mind that you're a pharmacist or anything.
Well, there could be. I know, but hey, this is not just. There are studies that have shown that, but here's.
It's so bad how doctors and like pharmacists and nurses and all of these professions that we're in, how we're just so bad. are taking our own advice.
But you know what? Yeah, you're right.
Oh, no,
but
I know what you mean.
It's different when you're the one prescribing the medications and dispensing it. But when it comes to you, you're almost like, it's a sense of otherness. And so, disclosure, I began using meds, last month. I had a personal crisis that I was talking for like 5 months. And I don't know if I remember. You probably remember when I said I wasn't trying to kill myself, but I wouldn't mind if a truck just hit me right now. Like I was praying for just that sweet, release of death. And that's when I knew things were really bad. And I prayed a lot. I did all of my meditations and whatnot. I still was in a bad place. And when I went to see my doctor, she was like, why not just try this out? And I remember talking to you about, it's going to alter my head. And you gave me that analogy of the frog, which I think you should totally share here once I'm done with my talk.
What's the analogy of the frog?
Can't you remember about the frog and the well?
Sorry, what?
The frog and the well. Like
help?
The frog and the well, help? Like, jumping out of the well, like by yourself, and then think of the medication as
because I know the analogy you're talking about, and I'm pretty sure you supplied the frog yourself.
Was it a frog in there?
No, it's fine. Obviously, that's the way. I find it so fascinating.
I was so sure there was a frog in there.
No. Actually, so this is the thing. This is the thing I find interesting. You're not a poor visualizer.
I'm an over visualizer.
You've enlarged and then.
I so hate you.
So I'm not gonna lie. When you said frog and well, I was like, I think this might be what she's referring to, but I'm pretty sure there was no frog. So maybe she means something else. Which is why I wanted. So I wasn't actually like trying to.
Maybe just talk about it then.
But I just realized, I know what you're talking about, but there's no frog. But maybe there should be a frog, because clearly a frog is missing here. Well, okay, so it's sort of this idea that, first of all, that we often think of, and I developed this idea from back in Nigeria, and I've actually found it useful here in the UK as well, which is where I practice. So obviously, it's one of those things that it's human, it's a human thing, and it's the idea of medication as a crutch, right? Where people will often view, and it's especially when it comes to mental health medication, which is an interesting thing, right? As, I don't want to depend on it. I don't want to
be addicted to it. Yeah.
I don't want. Well, they'll sometimes say addicted to it, but I mean depend, not even in the sense of addiction, which is how we normally use dependence actually, but in the sense of I don't want to have to need this, and I'll never forget a particular way someone I know once put it, because I thought that was the most succinct. Why should I have to take medications just to be happy? Was the question that this person asked. And it's a question that I found haunting, because I could, you can feel the pain and the poignant, longing in that question of, why can't I just be happy the way everyone else is happy? Why should I need, this crutch in air quotes, just to have something that should be normal, a normal human emotion? And I think I sort of came up with this analogy in trying to answer that question to that person. And I've sort of tried to use it since with many people. And it's that actually it's the wrong metaphor, right? And this is, just by the way, like one of the things I find is that a lot of times a big part of the problem in how we think about things is that we're using the wrong metaphors, but the metaphors we use carry implications, and without realizing we're carrying all the implications of that metaphor. So if you think of medication as a crutch, then automatically that means you have a weakness, and automatically that means you're like disabled. And while there's nothing wrong with being disabled, unfortunately, the way we think of being disabled in society is very negative. As pretty much any disabled person can tell you. And so because we know it's negative, we don't want to be that. you don't want to be in that position, because we know how we already think of people who are in that position that aren't us, that sort of thing. But on the other hand, how about thinking of it as a tool or as a weapon, right? And I would suggest something along the lines of, if you were in the forests in the middle of the night and it was dark and you could hear animals in the distance, and you happened to be able to lay your hands, never mind how, on a weapon, you are not going to say, I can't imagine that you would say, oh, why should I have to need a weapon to get, do you know what I mean? To get out of this forest or to keep myself safe. Why can't I just do it with my bare hands? Right? Now, it's not the most perfect analogy, because you could argue that, well, what you're trying to achieve is something everybody else can achieve. Whereas the forest thing, not everybody else can do that. And I hear that. But that's kind of beside the point. The real point is there's a difference between thinking of it as, why should I need this? Right? Which I think is disempowering. And I think that's what then happens, versus thinking of it as, this tool will help me to live the life I want to live. And if it will, because the truth is, at the end of the day, we all use all kinds of tools, right? Nobody says, oh, why should I have to drive to work? I want to walk. Why should I have to take a car just to get to, I want to walk like my ancestors? Nobody says that. Well, I mean, you can't choose to walk, obviously, because it's good for your health and all sorts of things. But my point is, there's millions of people who are driving and they're not thinking that, and they're not complaining about the fact that they take a car. And, plus, if depending on how far you live, it's probably a good idea to drive or bike or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And so the analogy that I use, which you're talking about, is one of someone is in a pit and it's a low, it's a 1 foot, 2 foot hole. You're just going to jump out. There's no big deal. If it's a 3 foot hole, you might need to climb out a little bit, but you're fine. You're going to jump out at some point. If it's a 10 foot hole, now you're in a bit of a pickle, right? You can't just jump. If it's a 20 foot hole and there's no footholds in the wall surfaces or whatever, now you're really in trouble, right? You're really screwed, and you're going to need a lot more help. Now that help might come in the form of a rope ladder that is thrown down for you to come up. But the interesting thing is, you're still going to need to apply some effort to the rope ladder, right? The rope ladder, even if it's just to hold the ladder while you're being pulled back up, right? Like, don't even climb, just hold it and we'll pull you back up. You're still going to have to do something. And so the way I think the way I talked about the medication is that instead of seeing the medication as, why should I need medication? It's like, maybe that's because you're thinking you're in a 2 foot hole or in a 3 foot hole. And you're saying, why should I need a rope ladder to get out? Because that's what the medication is, the rope ladder. But also, in the 20 foot hole where the rope ladder is there to bring you out, it doesn't negate your efforts. It just makes them meaningful. Because actually, if you're in a 20 foot hole and you're jumping and trying to get out of the hole by jumping, you're going to fatigue yourself, wear yourself out. And you might fatigue yourself to the point that when they do get a rope ladder thrown,
your legs are broken or
you might
mangled.
not be able to use it.
Yeah.
And so you may actually want to save that energy so that you can use it to climb up the rope ladder. And so medication is kind of like the rope ladder. And you still have to apply your efforts, but your efforts are now meaningful. Your efforts actually now get you out of there rather than frustrate you and achieve little while actually wearing you out and making you even more frustrated. Which is where I think you find a lot of people, when they finally get to taking medications, they feel like nothing else has worked. And the question I would sometimes ask is, well, let's try this one more thing.
Yeah.
Because they haven't tried it.
I think for me, I had to get to that point because nothing was working. And it was a funk that was it was a long funk that nothing else was working. And I think when I filled the prescription, I left it in my car for the longest time. And then I didn't want to touch it. It felt like poison. Like, no, because I thought that from the very first once I swallowed it, that was gonna be like, you know, that matrix, like,
Going
you know,
back.
red or blue pill. You know how they say if you've watched any drug addiction YouTube series, they say the first hit is the highest, and from there it's like you go downward. And it was on a Sunday. I remember sitting it was after church, online church. I remember sitting by my dining table, and when you talk about just being a very heaviness of heart, and at that particular moment, I'm like, what exactly is going on? Like, this is just after church, you know, I've prayed and all of that kind of stuff. I just went straight to my car and I popped the pill. And of course, it wasn't like instantaneous, because if you know anything about anxiety and antidepressant, it takes about 6 to 8 weeks. But two things made me really take it was, let's even change my brain. If I'm holding on to that line of thought, like, how has my current brain chemistry helped me? Because exactly, what have you done for me lately? I've probably been depleted. My serotonin levels, you know, have probably been depleted in such a way that it's really causing me to be in this funk, and combined with things that I'm going through personally right now. And then second was, the drug wasn't going to be the only thing I was depending on. I'm going to keep doing the things I've been doing. You know, I'm finding ways to bring joy to my life, moving my body, seeing a therapist. So nothing really is changing. I'm just trying this one thing, and I can always choose to stop it whenever I wanted to do it. And I began it, and it took about, I want to say, 3 weeks. And again, another thing I would like to say is, as a pharmacist, I was able to research the particular one I wanted, and I talked to my healthcare provider about it. And she, you know, took my preference into consideration. One, I wanted one that wasn't going to make me sleepy. I wanted one that was actually going to improve my sleep, because I have issues with sleep. I wanted one that wasn't going to make me put on weight, because some of them have that tendencies to. And I wanted one that had a very good, you know, at least a better side effect profile. And drugs will have side effects, but you have to choose your poison, no pun intended. And it took about 2 to 3 weeks. But I mean, I don't think I've ever told you. I don't think I've talked about this part yet with you. My thoughts are clearer. Now, do I have tendencies to still think that there's doom coming? It's always there, but it's not. There's no receptor that is connecting with to kind of articulate. Because there's always this feeling I felt at the bottom of my stomach, almost like doom is coming, doom is coming. And I've had so many great things happen to me. I mean, I became a mom, like, officially last month, and I'm able to celebrate that. But even while celebrating that, as happy as I was also despairing. So there was also despair in other areas of my life, and those two things weren't just going quite well. I'm able to concentrate better at doing other things. The boogeyman is there, but it's not just scaring me anymore. And I don't know when I lost my I don't know what the word was, but things that I've kind of lost my elasticity in certain areas of my life the older I get. Like, I'm beginning to see more realities, and I don't know what that is, why that is. Maybe it's just being a mom or just other life experiences. But I'm glad I took the medications, and I'm not advocating medications for everybody. You would know when you're in need of it. But I just want to encourage someone like me. Perhaps you've done everything, and it feels like you failed in not keeping yourself, you know, happy and that joyful self that you've always been. I'm not advocating for you to go, you know, take medications, but perhaps you've thought about it, and your fear has always been to alter my brain chemistry. Well, your brain chemistry is actually altered already, hence why you're in this funk. But you might want to consider this option. But please, you know, speak to your healthcare provider and make that decision yourself. I'm a pharmacist, so I know a lot about antidepressants, so that really works for me. But me sharing my story is just to maybe encourage somebody. And I could never have thought that in 1,000 years I'll come to this point where I can use medications for depression and anxiety, and then publicly talk about it. Because I thought I was the last of the Mohicans to ever do that. But here we are, and I'm glad I took that plunge.
I mean, well, I would actually probably advocate for medication, to be honest.
People here, you psychiatrists and population like 5 and 6 like this.
But I realize that feeds into a stereotype. I do see that, but I think what I say to people when people say things like, you don't need medication for mental health problems, the question I always want to ask is, what kind of mental health problems are you talking about? Because I think a lot of people are focused on one end of the spectrum. So actually, a lot of the guidelines indicate that or suggest that for mild moderate depression, for instance, medication should not be like first line. It should actually be therapy, right? And other kinds of support. But when it's severe, you definitely want medication. And I think the challenge is, well, so there's two sides to it. One is that I find that when it's severe enough that people need medication, you find that a lot of times they're still resisting it. And then you also find sometimes this tricky scenario where, I mean, I suppose I acknowledge that this is not easy, and I agree with you on the bit where you say, obviously this has to be a discussion with your doctor. So I'm definitely not advocating for anyone to take medication by themselves. But I'm talking more about like when it is offered, when it is suggested, being a bit more open to it rather than just instant pushback. And this whole idea of, I think there's an anti-medication sentiment that is quite prevalent, which I worry about because I see the flip side of it, which is the people who then don't take medication because of that. And actually get worse. Even though they're happy to do all sorts of other things that may not be helpful and may even be harmful. So for me, I think I will say that a lot of the psychiatrists I know they're not medication happy. Which I think is another misconception people sometimes have. Obviously, I'm also in the UK, so I can't really speak to other places, including the US, if I'm being honest. But I have friends who practice in the US, and to my knowledge, they're not medication happy either. Right? But I can't say that as confidently because I only know a few people and they're probably not representative. I will say this though. One of the key things that's really helpful is still therapy, whether in anxiety or depression, which are some of the more common ones. But therapy is hard. And one of the things I find is that sometimes people they avoid shrink back from therapy because it's hard. So sometimes actually, and I know this for a fact, that sometimes we have to prescribe people medication because they're not ready to do therapy. So there are times when we prescribe medication when we think therapy is probably a good idea. But people aren't ready for therapy and you can't just leave them like that.
I think it's a tragedy both ways.
But that's partly because, sorry.
I said it's a tragedy both ways, like, underutilization of therapy and overutilization of medications. I
mean, to be fair, therapy is also not easy to access. It's overloaded in places like the UK. The waiting times are...
Which is crazy. Even here, there's no waiting time, but the cost of therapy is quite expensive.
So that's what I'm saying. But it's time or money, isn't it? It's you're saving one, or if you're saving time, you're losing money. If you're saving money, you're losing time. Right? So even here too, if the therapy the therapist I see is paid because, I wanted to avoid the waiting list, but it's not cheap. Right? So one way or the other, you pay something. Whether it's money or time, you pay something. And I think that's a challenge for many people because there are people who can't afford that. And so they have to pay in money. Time, sorry. But maybe they don't really have the time either. But then what happens for those people? And there's no easy answers to that. Because again, part of why... So I won't say therapy is underutilized because if the waiting times are that long, clearly...
No, when I mean underutilization, I mean not from the people. I mean like when it's not used, when it's supposed to be used. And medications are like the proxies for that. I mean... And I think my fear is that people will begin to internalize those things not working as, it's a defect of who I am, right? Like if you've tried all of the things you're doing, and you're still not working and you're still in that funk, you start thinking, there's something fundamentally wrong with me. And if your brain chemistry is already compromised, as you're finding cases of depression and anxiety, because I mean, as you guys know, I can do things. Like I'm not like, like I get things done, but sometimes I'm just up at night. I can't sleep because there's so many thoughts going through my head. And there was just that moment where many things were just happening at once, and I was overwhelmed. I was like that person stuck in that, hole, and going to therapy. I've been in therapy for about 8 years, nonstop. Not like nonstop. I mean, I would take breaks here and there. I've had to move, therapy. But I've always had a therapist, on call that I could call for crisis modes and all that. So trust me when I say I have used everything. And I'm still in therapy. I haven't stopped doing the things I'm doing. And for me, the medication is not like going to I'm not depending on the medication to take everything away.
No, because you're still going to have to do things. Sometimes the medication gets in a place where you're even ready for therapy.
I can't describe just the clarity I feel. The thoughts haven't stopped. The anxious thoughts haven't stopped. But it's like, okay, so what? Almost like, okay, so... And I'm even sometimes I'm having this... It's not disabling. It's not like crippling me. It also helps me even have that self-talk about, okay, what are you even scared about? Like, okay, let's talk about this. Before I couldn't have that dialogue because it was too real and it was just ridiculous to be able to have that dialogue. But I cannot say, that's not tenable. You're just overthinking things. And I don't know how long I'm going to be using the medications for, but I know I have the power now, and I can definitely see it. It's changed my life, significantly. My husband will probably tell you I'm a better person to have around now than, the past how many months I've just been in this place. And so I hope this encourages somebody. I didn't think I was going to talk about this today this way, but let's connect.
Let's connect.
This was I don't know, why do I feel like I kind of spent this episode talking a lot about myself, and
maybe you needed
to. We didn't even talk about...
We're still recording, by the way.
Is that
health.
the plan? Yeah.
Maybe you needed to.
I'll live it. Yeah.
Maybe you needed to.
Well, we wanted to talk about mental health theme, and
it was mental health.
I'm not sure if... But I don't feel very fulfilling. Not because... I just feel like it's just been too much about me, and maybe there's not much of substance for people to learn from like they would normally on a regular. Because I don't know, I'm still not feeling very fulfilled. Like we've done justice to this episode. Like first I was rambling about my friend, and then now I'm talking about my, medication use. Why do I sound like a jerk?
We did. We started off talking about relationships, and we actually did.
It is.
We talked about relationships. And your friend is about relationships, and and this was we talked about therapy in the end. And I think this is useful. I think there's something about because these are real issues and real questions that people have, and there's something about sharing them. I think that's... Listen to it. I think you'll see it better. I think you'll see it better when you listen to it.
When I listen to it, I guess you're right.
If there's something you want us to talk about to add to it, we can. But I can't think of what that might be. I
can't think of anything yet. But I think another thing that encouraged me is when I brought my sister on the show to talk about experience with schizophrenia, the one that, I reached out to you about, if you remember. And one of the things we did on the show was to save up, get some donations for her to be able to be on her medications for a couple of years. And I know for a fact just how, when she's on her meds, how freeing and how much better she is on meds. And I'm like, come on,
why are you fighting this?
Exactly.
That's why I am advocating for it. That's what I see.
Yeah.
That makes me advocate for it, because I know what I see, and people don't see that.
Oh, and
people are looking at all the mild stuff and thinking,
I
you think I'm not dealing with mild depression? I don't see mild depression. Mild depression goes to the GP. I see severe, and I know the difference. I have patients that I'm always saying, and I love to show this with the students. I see patients who are abusive and terrible and horrible, racist, sexist, everything, and then they are well, and they're like the sweetest people. And it's like, who was that monster that we're seeing 3-4 weeks ago? But people don't see that. They don't see that. And then they go around talking all these things about, medication is not important. I'm like,
you should have faith.
Some professionals.
No.
That's the one that really upsets me. Even some professionals.
Yeah. It's worse,
I'll never forget the have faith people. I get where those are coming from.
That was
and I mean here.
Well, wait.
I don't just mean in back home. I mean right here in the UK, in the US.
Right here, yeah. There was this analogy that the Holy Spirit dropped in my heart one time when I was cooking, and I had made this. I don't know what, I can't remember what I was cooking, but it was a very good dish, but it was missing something.
Is that when you talk to your Holy Spirit?
Yeah, I was cooking, and it just
they cooking, you connect to God by food.
They come anytime, you know. My love language, amen. Somebody. Anyways, it was a beautiful dish, and it was gonna turn out perfectly, but something was quite missing. I forgot to put salt in it, and I was almost done with the cooking, and it was kind of cooking
you can't put the salt
I
at
need
the
to
end.
have, put the salt in at the very particular.
It won't go inside.
I could put it, but it was still gonna be better than not putting it at all. Yeah. But then, he helped me. They helped me connect, because I always think of the Holy Spirit as they pronouns. They helped me connect to the fact that it's kind of like me taking medications for what I was going through. No matter how much you're trying, I mean, this beautiful dish, you can serve it and all that. If you don't add that ingredient, it's not just going to come out well. And I could have plated it nicely, served it with a side of cold drink and whatnot. And you have to put salt in it. It's not about your lack of trying. It needs salt.
And if salt is missing,
it calls for medication, because that's it. And for me, it was almost like,
no, if the salt is there, the plating, you can even downplay it a little.
And the researcher in me, before taking that medication, I took a snapshot of my dreadful moments, because my journal is filled with just moments like that where I've talked about things I was going through. So, and I could never forget those moments. So I'm like, let's just do an intervention, pre-post, and then the medication will be the intervention, and then see how you're doing afterwards. And oh my gosh, like day and night. Or night and day, difference. And,
the difference,
so,
yeah. One of the things I love the most is when we have the reviews with patients, when the patient walks out and everybody is emotional. And you know why they're emotional?
Why?
Because remember how they were a few weeks ago.
Oh, you guys remember? Yeah.
Like they're walking away and we are discharging them, and we are emotional because we're thinking, wow, look at him, look at her, look at the turnaround, look at it. It's transformation, no? It's transformation we are doing. But you know what we are using to do that transformation? It's medicine. It's not talking.
Medications. This is the only time we can say do drugs.
The medicine,
and you should follow our
the talking is useful. The talking is useful, but if the medicine was not there, ain't no talking.
Yeah.
The talking is like plating.
Put salt in it. Put the salt in it. I think
plating cannot say this dish.
Let's connect, but we're gonna end it by saying say yes to drugs. That's just this is the only time we can say yes to drugs, and that it's a good thing. But I think this was really it on my end. We've talked a lot today, and thank you for getting me here, and thank you because you and I have always had this conversation about pharmacotherapy for about, how many years has it been now? It's been at least 6-7 years, right? And then when I was at the brink of considering it, you're the same person to come, to again. And thanks for being so encouraging about it. And we hope this episode encouraged you guys as well. Yeah. All right, guys. Catch you guys on another episode of the Merciful Podcast. And if you love this episode, don't forget to share and let us know what you took from it. And yeah. Bye, guys.
Bye.
All right.